Welcome, everyone, to episode 2 of What the F is Going On, where we use the consciousness technologies of astrology and the tarot to seek guidance in these intense times that we're living in. I hope you had a chance to see the first episode. It lays the foundation, but I don't think you have to have seen it. It just might be helpful. And so, what the F is going on? I've been sitting with it since the last episode. You know, recorded that back in September, and a lot has been happening since September. And I have to be honest, I I wanted to record something sooner, but I had to feel into this, and I'm still feeling into it. Like, how do we live with what's going on in the world right now? It's like super intense here in the United States, super intense in Syria and Israel and all kinds of places. And so we seek guidance with these ancient tools, astrology and the tarot. For me, the purpose of these technologies, which of course can be used for good and they can be used in ways that interfere with the good. But my intention whenever I pick up these tools is to make contact with some higher source of loving guidance. And so if you take up astrology or the tarot and you're not getting loving guidance, if you're not feeling more hopeful, more encouraged, more seen, then maybe it's not for you. Because then it's amplifying fears, or it's, getting in the way of hope. And so in the spirit of making contact with higher sources of loving guidance, let's begin. It's been really, really powerful, especially, I don't know if you've noticed, the last few weeks have been pretty kick-ass. They have been in my life. They seem to be pretty kick-ass in the international scene, the collective. But yeah, there's a lot going on. And, I wanted to wait to record this until the Mercury retrograde cycle completed, which it just did very early Sunday morning. And nothing against Mercury retrograde. It's not like I'm doing it because it's bad or waiting because it's bad. It's actually because it's helpful. It's very helpful for reflection and reconsidering things and going back over things. And I've had a lot of reflections in the last few weeks that I think have been helpful, and I hope will um, bring through greater clarity here. And in addition to the Mercury retrograde completing, um, we've just had our new moon in Aries, which is a special new moon every year. It's the new moon that really fully begins spring, except for those places it's been snowing. Sorry, guys. Yeah. New moon in Aries, conjunct Uranus and square Pluto. So this is a pretty big new moon. And I hope that if you're watching this, it doesn't have to be like right on the new moon for you to tune into what this energy is, especially whatever's there at the new moon. Astrologers see that when the new moon or the full moon lines up with especially outer planet alignments, it can symbolize powerful energies of that sort for the whole month ahead. And so in this case, because it's Aries and because it's in a very rare conjunction with Uranus, it doesn't happen that often because Uranus only goes through Aries every 84 years, and it's only in the sign for I don't know, what is it, 6 or 8 years, something like that. And so whenever it is in Uranus, it it's only going to have a new moon exactly line up on it 2 or 3 times probably. And that's the case with this one. We had a pretty tight new moon on Uranus a couple years ago, and then 2 years before that. But here we are. This is the last one. Uranus is going to move into Taurus later this year, and it does get back in Aries, but the new moon doesn't line up on it next year. So this is the last one. And so 3 of these moments every 84 years, definitely worth marking and reflecting on, and perhaps tuning into the potential of. And for me, it has a really big potential for new beginnings and leaping into a new phase of life or a new way of being, or kind of breaking free and being born into whatever's meant to be next. It's a birthing energy. Uranus has this quality of awakenings and the birth of new energy. And to have it in Uranus, or excuse me, to have it in Aries, and to have a new moon there, very special, powerful alignment to ritualize is what I'm suggesting. I've been reflecting on how can I honor this alignment? How can I take advantage of it in my imagination and imagine the possibilities of what it might indicate if I align myself with it? Because ultimately what we're doing is we're imagining ourselves into being. We're imagining our particular timeline, our particular universe. You know, if you take for granted, as I do, that there are very likely an infinity of parallel universes and parallel choices that we could be taking. But it's not infinite, really, because there's the most probable timelines. And even though there's great variety within them, it's, you know, it's a range of probability. And so you can align yourself with particular versions of your potential. And I think with something like an Aries new moon, you can take it up and imagine its potential and align with it, and you're going to follow a particular timeline. An Aries new moon Uranus timeline that starts now. And so I'm thinking about really marking this moment as the birth of a new phase of my life moving forward. I've been going through a lot of changes. I'm sure most of you are and have been. It's a time of change. It's a powerful, deep time of change. We've talked about the Uranus square Pluto alignment of our time. We've been living in it since 2008 or so, maybe a little sooner, but it's been building and building and kind of climaxing starting in around 12, 13, and since we've had kind of 5 years of climaxing Uranus-Pluto square energy. And last year, Jupiter joined it. In fact, Jupiter's still going to come back within the alignment opposite Uranus and not so tightly square Pluto, but it comes back within a 12-degree range of the opposition to Uranus for 3 months in June, July, and August of this year. And what we tend to see is once an alignment comes into a certain range, it's operative, and it's operative until the last time it moves out of that range. And so we're still very much in this kind of Jupiter, Uranus, Pluto kind of epic, powerful change energy. And we can all feel it. It's super intense. It's super transformational and evolutionary and potentially liberating. And so I've been feeling it. It's certainly been operative in my life in the last year. And I've been thinking about this Aries new moon as a potential for really taking all of that transformation and change and kind of ritualistically concretizing it and bringing it into being. And so may this be a moment of great change that is profoundly positive for you, because I think it can be. Pluto is a force of nature, profound force of nature. And when you align with the positive potential of it, tremendous things can happen. Tremendous evolution of consciousness can happen. I think we're all living in a time of profound ascension energies. We talked about it last time, this kind of Kundalini awakening of Mother Gaia. Mother Gaia herself ascending. Many people believe in the metaphysical circles out there that Gaia is going through an ascension process, and we are part of Gaia. And so we are going through an ascension process where the weightiness of this third dimension is wanting to elevate to a higher frequency of the fourth dimension, which is still basically third dimensional reality, but it's with an extra turbo boost of potential and greater expanded awareness and greater likelihood of a kind of heart chakra emphasis, more open-heartedness, more expanded awareness. That's the fourth dimension. More of a sense of living outside of time, more of a kind of timeless awareness, which is very helpful when you're living in something that feels very dense, like it's super serious and real, and there's time, and it's challenging here. But I think it's likely to get a lot easier, and I think that's what this process is that we're going through, a kind of great birthing process. I'm shuffling cards here. It's good to remember the cards when you don't know what to say. That's why I've got them. So today I want to use the cards for guidance. And so let's pray together, shall we? Pray to the tarot technology that connects us up with higher frequency and higher guidance. For me, the tarot is shuffling meditation. It's mindfulness practice with shuffling. And it's about relaxing and being receptive, soft-bellied, with just a sense of opening to the moment that the card turns itself over. Not trying to find the card. I'm not focusing, is this the card? Is this the card? No. I'm waiting for a card to turn itself over. So let's see if one wants to come. It's a general guidance spread. Guide us. Guide me. All these cards are relevant individually and I assume collectively, but they're meant for whoever's watching this. And so, guidance for me, guidance for you. How do we live with this time of ours? How do we tune into the higher parallel timelines and choose one that's a little friendlier, a little more loving, a little more fun, not so damn serious, where there's less Facebook, less TV, more nature, more friends, more dancing. Get off Facebook, get off CNN, get off Fox, right? Don't spend your time there. I'm talking to myself. Yeah, Facebook. What the fuck is going on with Facebook? Facebook is evolving. It's evolving into a darker potential. It's becoming very powerful artificial intelligence, basically. Powerful algorithms are following us and predicting our behavior. It's true. There's an article in The Intercept the other day about part of their technology that hasn't been publicly announced, but it's known to their marketers. They've developed technology that can predict when we're likely to leave a particular product, for example, that we're kind of getting tired of whatever, and we say something in a post to somebody. I don't know how they do it. And then they somehow can see this person has a higher probability of not being into your product. Do you want to buy our service, and we'll influence this person and reinforce your desired outcome or prevent it? It's amazing. Wow. So, I mean, literally, they're refining the algorithms to be more effective at getting us to buy shit or not buy shit. That's, old school. Photography, television, radio, they all have been used for that. They're all consciousness technologies that can be used for good or ill. But here's Facebook. It has the potential to be so good. It connects us up in really great ways. I experience Facebook as a consciousness experience, a certain kind of consciousness experience. It's becoming more narcotic than it used to be. It used to be more fun. There was less of this kind of predictable rhythm to the post that kind of induces either real dark negativity, or I don't know what else. Usually it's that for me lately. Like, oh shit, the last rhino just went. That's great. I get to see it 50 times a day that northern white rhino, or I'm not sure which rhino, has gone extinct. Bummer. That's the Saturn-Pluto energy that we need to talk about. This is the new energy of now. We've moved into a rare Saturn-Pluto conjunction. The last time we had one was 1981 to 1984. So we've moved into a rare Saturn-Pluto conjunction, and it's a big, big, new, powerful energy. It's not totally radically different from what we've been living with, because we've had a Uranus-Pluto square, and we still are in a Uranus-Pluto square. But now Saturn's coming onto it. At the end of the Uranus-Pluto square, Saturn is combining with it. Saturn makes things real. That's one of its qualities. It makes things really real. We're in a moment where things are getting real, right? People are getting messages on their cell phones in Hawaii and Japan. Prepare for incoming ballistic missile. You know, somebody made a mistake apparently and hit the wrong button. And everybody's like running for cover in Hawaii, of all places. I mean, wow. That's real. That's super serious. Saturn is serious. Pluto's intense. Intense and serious and real. As we have this other alignment with Mercury, it is currently stationary square Saturn. And it's part of this longer alignment where basically Mercury has been going back and forth across a Mars-Saturn-Pluto triple conjunction. That's what we got going on right now. Mars is given a big push to this Saturn-Pluto conjunction, which has been coming in since late last year, but has been getting stronger and stronger. And I'd say this is a kind of climactic push of this first phase of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, which will be lasting into 2020. We've got quite a sequence here in the next few years. Strong Saturn-Pluto conjunction coinciding with the USA-Pluto return. If you'll recall, Pluto's gone all the way around the solar system. It takes 250 years since 1776, when the United States was born. 500 years, or excuse me, 250 years. Pluto return. So really powerful Pluto energy there. We're in this longer lasting Uranus square Pluto. And now Saturn is going across the Uranus-Pluto square. First, it's conjoining Pluto, and then it's going to square Uranus. So the whole sequence, first the conjunction, and then the square to Saturn is through 2022. So I think we're in about a 4-year process here with Saturn, a longer process with the United States Pluto return, and then the Uranus return. 2 huge cycles ending for the United States in sequence here. Pluto's gotten a lot closer recently to the exact return. It's it's 6 degrees only. Is that right? Yeah, Pluto's only 6 degrees away from where it was at the birth of our nation here, the United States. And if you'll recall, the United States is born on July 4th, 1776, with Mercury opposite Pluto, which Pluto is intense and deep and powerful and potentially manipulative and dangerous. And Mercury's the mind, communication. You know, it has a lot to do with the potential for like spying and mental manipulation and brainwashing. And so not surprising that the United States would ultimately develop what's likely the most powerful spy technology on the planet. And I'm not talking about Facebook, I'm talking more about the NSA. I think they're different. Mercury Pluto is, it's the powerful communications technologies ultimately. And the powerful use of words. Mercury Pluto's the power of words, the power of communication, to do harm, to manipulate, to have power over, to control, and it has the power to do good. Mercury, in its words, its language, its communication, has the capacity to do good. Mercury Pluto can be powerful, deep communication that's compelling in the best possible ways. I think of it as the power of spells. I think words are spells, and we have the capacity to cast spells upon people, upon collectives, with the words that we choose and the way that we say the words, and ultimately the way in which we think, the thoughts that lead to the words. The energy that's in the thoughts ultimately comes out in the words spoken out loud, and their power to convince, to compel, to awaken, to manipulate. And so you can see where I'm going here, where this natal alignment of the United States and its Mercury-Pluto capacity to manipulate the masses with mass media technology and spying capacities and algorithms that can transform our thought patterns, ultimately. And we're getting to the territory now, obviously, with the Facebook story that's developing. A whole growing story about artificial intelligence and the way in which these artificial intelligence algorithms can learn to get better at things. And if they're being taught or they're learning how to manipulate people to the advantage of, say, advertisers and corporations, they're going to get more and more sophisticated at that. That's the power of that technology, the power of the communications technology, ultimately the consciousness technology. Facebook is a consciousness technology that can be used for good, and it can be used to harm. This story is developing under this Mercury going across the Saturn-Pluto alignment. Mercury-Pluto is what George Orwell is born with, what the United States is born with. The energy that we're definitely working with has some of that Orwellian quality. When Facebook ultimately has technology that can predict future behavior, which apparently they do, and they can sell it to advertisers, as they most likely will. This predictive technology can learn about you and your likely probable behaviors in the future. And then it can act to influence them or to cut off those behaviors or to amplify them. Wow, that's intense. This artificial intelligence. And we're going to be discussing that in the coming years. It's going to be an area of focus. And it's going to happen under this Saturn-Pluto conjunction. I feel like we need a card. I think I need a card. Breathing and relaxing. Let's see what card wants to come here. Being receptive to a card of guidance. One almost came there. Didn't seem quite like it wanted to do it. It's the Osho deck. David Padma's awesome deck. That was 2 cards. I'm not sure. Innocence. Innocence. An image of a wise old Zen master in the Zen monk robes with a praying mantis on his finger and prayer beads in his other hand and pink blossoms blooming. Cherry blossoms, I assume. He's looking at that praying mantis like I'm looking at this card with a sense of innocence. What's this about? I think it's an image that's reminding us to pray. And perhaps if this 5-card spread that I'm going to do here, which is a guidance spread, question and answer spread, the first card is supposed to represent, deepen, and clarify the question. And the only question I had was basically looking for guidance, basically a prayer. Guide us, guide me, guide us through this deep moment, this Saturn-Pluto moment, this kind of deadly serious time. Praying for guidance. I think that's good place to start every day. Praying for guidance. That's tapping into some higher guidance, not trying to live from the egoic limitations. Praying for guidance. Here are my suggestions for Saturn-Pluto times. Here are my suggestions. When it's intense and there's lots of shadow work needing to be done, and that's what's going on here. There's a lot of shadow work that needs to be done for all of us, individually and collectively, obviously. My suggestions for heavy times, serious times, deadly serious times, Saturn-Pluto times. Number 1, good self-care. Always. Number 1 principle in any challenging moment whatsoever, unless you're just super chill on a beach somewhere, here's number 1 guidance. Good self-care. Really good self-care. Taking really good care of your health on all levels. Certainly physical health. Like number 1 priority right now is to have strong health and vitality. We're dealing with some major shit. We need to be healthy for it. That's what I'm focusing on. This past year, I encourage people year by year, get more and more serious about your health on all levels. And this means slowing down, exercising more, doing your best to eat well. I'm going to keep trying there. But definitely exercise, eat well, do nourishing things for yourself. Be kind to yourself, more than usual. Slow down, work less, focus on self-care more. The whole culture is programming us to stay busy, to live in fear and anxious about what about the future? I got to work really hard now. But no, good decisions are not made from busyness. Good decisions, good choices, healthy choices are made from health, from balance. And so number 1 suggestion from me to everyone during this time is really take good care of yourself, especially here on the front end of this alignment that's going to last a while. This alignment with Saturn first on Pluto, and then around 2020 it combines that year, where it's both on Pluto and Uranus, on both Pluto and Uranus, like it was back in the 2008 to 12 period. At the front end of this alignment was a pretty intense period. And here at the end of the Uranus-Pluto square, another pretty demanding alignment. Saturn going across it. Saturn matures things. So we're likely to see a lot of maturation of the Uranus-Pluto material, if you will. The Uranus-Pluto lessons and challenges are likely in many ways to be resolved and integrated in a more mature way. And that's one of the great gifts of the coming years, is I think we're going to see more and more like we have of these amazing young people that were in the tragic Parkland, Florida school shooting. They're the response that we're seeing from them, where they are really coming across as very serious, mature people. And offering mature guidance to us older folks. I think they're showing us the way, and I think this is the time to be bowing to these young millennials. They're carrying new awareness, new energy, new consciousness. It's very valuable for all of us to listen to and to try to integrate their wisdom into whatever our wisdom is. Pausing. Number one, good self-care. Number two, part of that is really working on yourself psycho-spiritually, taking more time than usual to connect with your higher self, your higher knowledge, some kind of higher love force, really tuning into the heart chakra and trying to live a kind of fourth dimensional lifestyle, one inspired by contact with the divine. And then, of course, during Saturn-Pluto times, a focus on shadow work. Shadow work. What is shadow work? So what is shadow work? What is it? How do you do it? How do you begin to do it? Well, there's so many approaches to shadow work. I've done a few different things in my time. You start to do personal shadow work more deeply as you get into the midlife transits. They're called midlife process, midlife individuation process. Big part of that for lots of people is starting to look at the shadow, the repressed aspects of the psyche, the darker, uglier parts of us that we prefer not to look at. I know I don't like to look at it, that yucky stuff. But if you don't, over time, it tends to cripple you, and you start to be taken over by that material because it wants to be integrated. It wants you to recognize it and treat it with love, ultimately, to accept it as part of yourself and to start to be in dialogue with it so that it's at the table, at least, honored for having some perspective, the perspective of the shadow. And it's very helpful to know that you have a perspective that's shadow-oriented so that you can be in dialogue with it and to bring it into balance or to heal it. And so for me, that process, really started to kick in around 35. I'm 48 now. So I've done, I feel like I was doing shadow work before that, but it got real in my mid-30s. And one of the big ways that I did it was a focused period of 12-step work in one of the programs. Doesn't matter which. They all ultimately are about working with the shadow aspects and bringing a healing process to them. And the biggest thing in the 12 steps is what's called a searching and fearless moral inventory. And that primarily involves looking at your resentments, the things that you're angry about. You also look at your sex patterns and money patterns. That's all fun. But resentment is where it begins and ends. What are you angry about? What are you judging? Who are you critical of? What exactly are you judging and being critical of? How are you blaming others? All this good stuff. Character issues, they're called. Patterns of judgmental behavior. And so, yeah, with the help of a guide, it's not really good to do shadow work on your own, I don't think. You want to feel support because it's not easy. You have to ultimately have your heart open to yourself and have a loving attitude towards yourself, accepting that you're flawed like everyone and you have shadow material like everybody. And so you have to do that with support because a guide will help you to be loving while you're looking at the shadow. And then ultimately you learn to be more loving on your own. And it's not as necessary to have that guide later. But when you're first starting out with serious shadow work, you get a guide and you start to look at where do you have anger and resentment. And so these times that we're living in, there's a lot to be angry and resentful about. I know for me there's a lot. And so the big thing is to look at what's my side of the street. How am I a part of this? What is my piece? How can I bring my own transformational process, and by working with my own transformation, ultimately contributing to the transformational process of the collective. And so particularly looking at, like, what is it that I'm judging? And so, like, with our president right now, I imagine there's quite a few of us that are working with some judgments towards this individual. And what is it specifically that we judge? And, you know, it could be so many things. What comes to mind right now that I am judging? He seems to be somewhat cold-hearted at times, you know, like he's not considering other people, you know, cold-hearted, withholding of love, affection, you know, withholding of human kindness. And so the inquiry then is, how can I be more kind and accepting of Trump? How can I have some kind of love or open-heartedness, I guess, towards this person? And what helps is when I look at how am I like that? I'm obviously not as extreme as he is in certain ways. He's a huge public figure and ultimately a mirror for all of us. We're all mirrors for each other. It's a fundamental spiritual principle. And so the president of whatever country you're in is just a giant mirror for all the people, not just the ones that elected him or her. It's a mirror for all of us. And so this is our collective leader, and he is at the front end of whatever the collective shadow material is for our country. All the shadow that started back with Native American genocide and then slavery and then, you know, the oppression of all kinds of different classes of people. All that trauma, all that pain, all that repressed material, because we don't like to think about it. We want to deny it. This is part of the Saturn-Pluto work, working with trauma, collective trauma, individual trauma. That's part of this moral inventory. It's like looking at the resentments and often how they're fueled by our own traumas. And then we act out from the trauma, our own pain, our own hurt, whether it's ours, our families, our ancestors. And we project things onto others. This is another big thing with Saturn. Pluto, tendency to project evil or project the shadow onto others and then persecute, judge, punish that which has been split off from yourself, acting as if all the shadow is outside, it's all bad over there, and it's all good here, without being willing to open to how you might have some of those shadow aspects that you're seeing outside and judging. Yeah, I guess the most recent example that comes to mind with President Trump is where he's just offhandedly suggested the idea that we have the death penalty for drug dealers. I mean, the death penalty itself is a Saturn-Pluto territory. You know, the shadow potential for that, the death penalty in any culture and how we talk about it, whether we decide it's a good thing or not a good thing. That's Saturn-Pluto territory. Saturn-Pluto can be like the Grim Reaper, and so it definitely can bring up any material that has to do with death and fear of death and all that. The death penalty for drug dealers. Wow. So this whole addiction crisis that we have, supposedly, is the result of drug dealers and doesn't have anything to do with the ultimate drug dealers, which of course are the pharmaceutical companies. You know, they're the ones that are prescribing, or they're making the opiates that are being prescribed in mass numbers to so many people. And so this impulse to kill it's an exaggerated response. Like, obviously, you know, Trump is on the corporation side and the whole government is apparently run by corporations at this point. And so, you know, he's the one that's or he's in front of what is ultimately the ultimate drug dealer that leads to death, corporations. And yet it's a shadow thing, hard to look at. If Trump or any of the corporate leaders were to really look at what's going on and feel into it from a human level of love on some level, it'd be hard to face. And so it gets projected out. I see it over there. There's drug dealers over there. Let's get them. It's potentially a shadow, maybe it's not a projection. Maybe it's totally, conscious, which would make it evil. And so that's a possibility. But let's just accept that it's a projection. And so this is where you work on pulling back the projection, where you try to ask yourself, how am I like this? How do I see in this case, I see Trump as cold-hearted. Well, where am I cold-hearted? Maybe I'm cold-hearted towards Trump. I'm trying to find some way to like him. I mean, I have to. I learned this from Ram Dass. Ram Dass used to put, at the time, I think it was Dick Cheney, he talked about putting on his altar next to his guru picture and sending love. It's a hard thing, but I think it's a pretty good way to be, to try to ultimately send love rather than fear or hatred or whatever. Because when you do that, you're in an attitude of fear and hatred towards someone, and that's the consciousness you're in. And that tends to get mirrored back to you. So it's not really useful to have lots of fear and judgments, And so working to find a way to not live in fear and to not live in judgment, to be more in acceptance, to love thy neighbor, turn the other cheek. Somebody like the Dalai Lama is a great guide here. He's not, he's not Pollyanna about the Chinese government. He has very strong feelings, political feelings that he wants to change things. And yet his attitude is to try to not have hatred, to try to stay in an open-hearted orientation. This is Shadow Work 101. So what else do I want to say about it? What else do we want to think about with Saturn-Pluto? Here's some other themes that I have been reflecting on. So continuing with the suggestions for Saturn-Pluto, the first, good self-care, slow down, take really good care of yourself. Why is this? Because so often during these times, there's trauma material that's more at the surface. And so when that's the case, we have the potential to really acting out and making choices from activated trauma material, if we have any. And we're all connected to trauma material on some level. So it's more likely to be up. And the best way to work with that is to slow down and to be super kind to yourself and super loving to yourself so that you can be in a heart-open space while you be with whatever that material is that's coming up. And hopefully you can do that with support, with, be able to process it in different ways with different psychospiritual tools. But that's really hard to do if you're not kind of being gentle with yourself and giving a lot of space so that you can move slow enough to keep your heart open with these more intense areas of the psyche. That's step one, good self-care, gentleness, kindness to self, slow down. And then this focus on shadow material, like actively trying to do shadow work. I mentioned 12-step searching and fearless moral inventory. There's, of course, many other ways of doing shadow work. Psychotherapy, good psychotherapy is, all about that. Not all about it. And this reminds me, another big principle with shadow work, with Saturn-Pluto work, with the challenging parts of it, it's heavy material. And so you want to just limit yourself to a certain amount of your time and energy being with that material. It's possible to overdose on anything. You can overdose on doing shadow work. You can overdose on playing. You can overdose on relationships. You can overdose on reading. And so, like having a balance in each area, this is one of the things that astrology is awesome for, because it's a map of balance and wholeness. Whether it's the 12 signs of the zodiac representing 12 really important areas of human need, or the 10 planets, or if you include Chiron or others, 11, 12, whatever. 10 main principles where, Pluto is indicative of shadow material. It's 1/10, or it's maybe 1/12. And so you should only be given 1/10 of your time to that shadow stuff. And when it comes to a time like ours, when there's a lot of shadow stuff happening in the world, it's very tempting to be reading about it all the time and to be reflecting on it, to get obsessive about being in contact with it because it's scary, and you got to protect yourself. But I think you want to limit yourself to engaging it only a certain amount. And this has been, for me, I've tried to come back and into balance in these last, about halfway through 2017, I had gone deep into the shadow stuff, and just reading it and watching it, all that. Felt like I kind of wrapped my head around it about the time I did that last WTF recording in September last year. And then I was like, I got to slow down. I got to kind of pull out a bit. And maybe some of you have too. Just like it can overwhelm you with negativity, basically existential angst. And so I've been trying to like dip my toe in for an hour or two here and there to just stay on top and tuned in to what's going on, not to live in denial or dissociate, although I tend to. A lot of people with trauma do. So that might be part of what people are working with under Saturn Pluto, tendencies to dissociate from trauma activating stuff. It's just coming up right now as I'm saying it. This is where Saturn Pluto has a lot to do with grounding, deep grounding. Deep is Pluto, Saturn is grounding. So grounding into the depths of the earth, centering and grounding into your full human third dimensional body here in this dimension, like feeling into it, being with the feelings that are here deeply. That's really important in order to not go into that dissociative checkout. This is where it's a kind of feedback loop. You do a piece of shadow work, you open your heart a little bit, you're able to get more grounded, and then you take a break. You take a break and you have some fun, you be with your favorite people, you nourish yourself in different ways, and then you go back to the New York Times headlines and get bummed out again. No, you try to be with it, try to feel into it, participate in the collective reality, working with it if you can, taking breaks when you can't. And you balance things out, and the planets are your guide. 10% to Pluto, darkness, shadow material. Saturn is more like getting real, staying safe. Saturn has something to do with protection. And how you protect yourself, how you protect others, how you protect the things you believe in. And so this is another kind of key way I'm thinking about this Saturn-Pluto time period. It's a time where there is an awareness more of the deep, powerful forces of nature that are... It's a focus on the deep, powerful forces of nature that support protective structures, an empowerment of protective forces of nature. The animals and insects and all living creatures have, genetically programmed responses to when they're under threat, and there's protective mechanisms. And so we all need to be kind of tuning into, how do I protect myself in a loving way as opposed to a paranoid way? That's the shadow side of protection impulse, is building walls. That's, one thing we're seeing here. It looks like Trump's going to try to deliver. We'll see. But we're likely to see a wall going up, I guess, under the next few years. Or hopefully not. Let's not envision that. But it's more like these are intense times. You slow down and you think about, how do I protect myself? How do I stay safe? How do I make it possible to care for myself and others? And I've been feeling some of that. Part of me that's been very protective towards myself and others. Just trying to figure out what's the best way to stay in health, protect my capacity to stay healthy. So that's Pluto empowering our awareness of our protective instincts, being mindful with them so they don't go to extremes or you're cutting people out. That's more the splitting potential, the barrier making, the wall building, versus the protective, subtler forms of protection. You don't have to completely cut things off. Feel a second card coming. Here it is. Woo! Guardian Angel, guidance card. So, wow. We made a prayer for guidance. We got this guy praying with the praying mantis. And look what came. Guidance. Wow. Awesome. You can read the cards however you want. They're meant to take you into your imagination, meant to take you into a healing flow. Ultimately meant to take you into a positive flow state. I think that's what the cards are meant to inspire. If you go into working with cards or working with any symbolic system with the attitude that I'm going to be receptive and open to loving messages of guidance, that's what the process is. And so if that's your orientation, then as the cards come, you're surrendering to a flow state where you receive the guidance. And I think that's what I've been trying to do here. Stay in a flow state while I receive guidance to say whatever's trying to come through. I know it's not exactly all structured perfectly. I don't have my keynote presentation for you. It's not all, I've got some notes here. I'm looking at them. But going with the flow, and the flow has been prayer followed by guidance. The Three of Rainbows, Three of Pentacles. It's interesting. This is the card that has to do with Earth, and yet clearly it's making contact with some higher being, whether that's higher self, guardian angel, or archangels, whatever. But it's the suit that has to do with the Earth realm. So I think it's reminding me that, while Saturn-Pluto is about getting real, getting grounded, building protective structures, building foundations, it's interesting. Pluto's about destroying things, but then renewing them in new and more powerful ways. Oh, look, the trust card on the bottom, trust card on the bottom. Oh, that's good. Cards are flowing good. Encouraging trust, trusting the process, trusting the flow, trusting the process, trusting the flow. Saturn, Pluto, it's about hard work. Right now, this past month, the next month with Mars on the Saturn, Pluto, wow, it's a good time to work hard. Work hard and build stuff that might last forever. That's the possibility. Work hard to build stuff that could really endure. I think that's one way of imprinting this new moon in Aries conjunct Uranus, is the leap into a new chapter with the potential to build stuff that's really strong and lasts forever. That's a strong combo. It's kind of like this person who's, maybe it's not an angel, maybe it's inspiration. Doesn't matter what I say about this. Ultimately, it's where it takes you. But it's someone that's in contact with inspiration. The inspiration of seeing new possibilities and being in contact with maybe the guidance of the future. While at the same time grounded here on the earth. Pentacles, rainbows are about the earth. And here's the trust fall through the blue sky to a yummy, pink, fluffy, welcoming safety net of some sort. Saturn Pluto has to do with safety nets, protective structures meant to protect people, protect environments, protect nature. So on the one hand, Pluto's destroying protective structures, but in response, the people are rising up to build those structures stronger than ever. So we're seeing stuff torn to shreds, and, you know, they're stealing all kinds of shit. It's a kleptocracy, as someone named it. Kleptocracy. Not a democracy anymore. It seems to be, I was thinking of it as a smash and grab. It's a smash and grab. You know, it's like they have smashed everything and they're going to grab as much as they can while the ship goes down. Do I think the ship is going down? I don't know. Truthfully, I have hope. I don't think it's going to all go down because I think there's all kinds of possible forces at work that could help. And this reminds me of the awesome story that happened in December when we had official government disclosure of our government's interest in the UFO phenomenon. What are they calling it now? Unidentified aerial phenomenon, UAP. New York Times, Washington Post, New York Magazine, Politico, they all have front page, major pieces seriously talking about UFOs and that it's okay to talk about UFOs, that major senators are super interested. Harry Reid, wow, awesome. He comes out, read the New York Magazine interview with Harry Reid. Amazing interview. He's talking about his relationship with John Glenn and Robert Bigelow and this very deep interest in what is going on. Of course, there's been amazing interest in this. Many people are interested in this area, but until December, it was like snickered at, always. Shamed, judged, any kind of interest in it. You're crazy. We've decided long ago there's nothing there. But now we find the government invested $30 million at least. We know there's a whole lot more being spent. But they admit that there's $30 million of interest in this phenomenon. And this was a great moment for me. And it's indicative, I think, of the Jupiter-Uranus opposition of our time. A moment where it's like, wow, a breakthrough. This is a big breakthrough, big change. That they're admitting that something's going on, acknowledging it, disclosing it. So I'm back. Another little tech issue here. Storage unit filled up. I had to switch devices for the recording here, and I'm back. So we were talking about UFO disclosure. Very important area for me, as someone who's been very interested in this matter ever since I saw Close Encounters. I think that was back in 1980, maybe? Yeah, it's a long time, and different periods where I got more into it and read a bunch and then not so much. And then about, 6-7 years ago, I got really interested in it and found that there's lots there to explore, lots of evidence in different ways. Particularly interested in the consciousness component to what's going on with this phenomenon. It seems as though there are intelligent beings that are caring about this planet at this time and seem interested in making contact with us, at least on a consciousness level. But, obviously they're making contact in other ways. So this has been a very interesting and deep area of inquiry for me for a long time, and yet it's always been, something you can't really maybe talk about openly just because, you try to put it out there seriously in the mainstream media before, it was, made fun of. But now, since December, there's been just very serious talk about it. It's become okay to have serious conversation about the phenomenon, which is an incredible relief. Because it doesn't have to stay in the shadows. You don't have to be ashamed of the fact that you're interested in it and you want to talk about it and you want to see what's going on. Because the fact of the matter is, if something's going on, it could really impact everything. I'm especially interested in the technologies that seem to be hidden from us, stolen from us, really. We know since 1947 with the Roswell story, and that's where I'd encourage anybody to start. There's some great books like The Day After Roswell and Witness to Roswell. Those are the two I'd recommend. And Roswell happened in 1947, July 47, exact Saturn-Pluto conjunction like we have now. Prior to the Roswell conjunction, the 1913 to 18 period, the Federal Reserve came into being. Another area I would encourage inquiry into. These are the areas of the deep state, the really deep state. And it's, I think, good to know. I think that's one of the things about a Saturn-Pluto time is we all have to take responsibility for the inquiry into the shadow trauma material, our own, but also that of the collective which we participate in. So it's a really good time to know your history, to study up on more of the shadow aspects of history, the ones that maybe are not so openly discussed because of, say, the corporate control of the media. And this is the Saturn-Pluto shadow aspect is, you know, Pluto can empower the Saturn, pausing for a second here. Pluto can empower the control aspect of Saturn. So Pluto can intensify and lend its power to the Saturn impulse towards control or mastery over. And so you can also get a kind of consolidation is a Saturn thing, a consolidation of power, like the consolidation of power that has happened in the executive branch of the U.S. government, apparently, with this most recent strike on Syria the other day, clearly in violation of the U.S. Constitution. You need Congress to declare war or sign whatever they're supposed to do before the president is supposed to be able to do this. It's called checks and balances, which is another good thing to think about for yourself. Do you have good internal checks and balances to kind of correct for certain shadow aspects? There's checks and balances of our psychology that balance us. And so it's good to be aware of our own executive function or executive branch and have a judicial branch, a positive judicial that really takes inventory and hears the different arguments and can take them all into consideration and set ethical guidelines to live by. I think that's another positive potential of Pluto's Saturn. Saturn has something to do with discernment, positive judgment or evaluation. And this is another positive side of Saturn-Pluto, where Pluto brings its depth and its force of nature to the positive side of wisdom of Saturn, a positive potential of Saturn to be wise. So you can get deep wisdom. Deep wisdom is what's supposed to be. It's supposed to be in the Supreme Court. It's there to some extent. It's history. There's certainly deep wisdom that has been powerful because of the power of that check to the executive branch. You know, we've stayed on course to some degree with the arc of, what is it? The moral arc of the universe, which bends towards justice. Ultimately, it does that because of the powerful wisdom and deep history of that wisdom, guiding individuals and guiding nations. So I like to think about turning to wise elders to get guidance. Wise elders in my own personal Supreme Court, and then in the Congress of my psyche, I try to have all kinds of people that I admire, that I try to consult, internally in my imagination. In my Congress, I try to think about, my favorite people that inspire me and that I've voted for, in a sense. My elected senators and Congress people, the Speaker of my internal house. John Boehner, how about that? Sorry for the tangent. But John Boehner, wow. John Boehner gets the suppression card. What's that about? Well, that's the fourth card, right? Fourth card is the environment in this spread, typically. First card is the beginning of the conversation. The second card is, how the conversation flows, but it also indicates the background of the conversation. Third card's supposed to represent the questioner. That's us, the questioner, the people engaged with this process here. So this is good. This mirrors back to us our own trusting capacity, our capacity to trust the process that we're in, the death rebirth process that is happening collectively right now. This ascension process, this evolutionary process, the birthing process, trusting it. That's us. Awesome. In the environment, though, that's the fourth card is more others, or people, places, and things, obstacles, allies. And here's one of the shadow cards in this Osho deck. At least that's how the artist mod Deva Padma. So this is one of the shadow cards in the deck. The Ten of Fire. Ten of Fire often indicates like things coming to a boil, like tons of fire, like fire out of control. That kind of fits the environment right now. Things are on fire, and also this is a Saturn-Pluto image, totally. It's called suppression, and Saturn can block and suppress the plutonic transformational energies that are trying to do their thing. But it blocks it, and then you get bound up in knots, and you get armored, and you get all PTSD'd out. That's the environment. That's the negative potential, I would say, for the Saturn-Pluto, especially the Mars-Saturn-Pluto energy right now. It's super, like, major birth contraction energy. If it's felt like you've been kind of toughing it out the last 3 weeks, hanging in there, trying to get things done. That's really good with Mars, Saturn, Pluto. You want to get your work done. It's a good time to work hard. Watch out for working too hard. You got to balance that out. It's a good time. It's a season of work, let's put it that way. And so it's a good time to channel some energy towards work and then also learn what it is to have balance. How do you work hard and not so much that you go off the middle path? The middle path, the Buddha taught, is the path beyond extremes. The Buddha tried all this extreme stuff, extreme practices, striving, working his ass off, and it didn't work. He gave up and, chilled out, rested under the Bodhi tree, and found the middle path, the yummy middle path, where you don't have to stress so hard. You can slow down. You don't have to be an A+ student. Whoop. Oh, look. This card popped out. The success card. That's the straight A student, or it's the person who's figured out that you don't have to be a straight A student. That's me. I finally figured it out. I'm 48. I've learned to slow down. It's okay. I'm aiming towards the B. B-, whatever. If you aim towards the middle path, that's where you end up. This card just popped out. Clinging to the past. The 5 of Cups. This character is holding on to the past. I think that's one of the things that is trying to happen right now. Saturn has to do with the past. And, when you've got trauma, the past has power over you. When you've got trauma, the past has power over you. But if you bring healing attention to the trauma, the past loses its grip. You heal it. You bring love to that area. You relax into it. You balance it out with all kinds of other forms of healing awareness. And instead of clinging to the past, this is a representation of a sparkling glass of nectar of some kind. The fountain of youth, the deliverer of the sweet juices of life are there if we can transform, bring healing awareness to the past, and ultimately, through awareness of it, it can evolve, transform. And with Pluto-Saturn, you get this kind of, you can get an eruption, like this card here, the eruption of the unprocessed trauma material, often through different kinds of psychological projection and whatnot. With Saturn-Pluto, you can get an eruption of unprocessed trauma material. It's like closer to the collective psyche's surface. That unprocessed trauma material, like all of the oppression and genocide of native peoples and slavery and on, all the trauma of all the beings and nature and animals, of course. Saturn-Pluto has a lot to do. I was saying earlier about it can be the death of nature, like the tragic loss of that rhinoceros species, and the death of the oceans and whatever's happening with the situation with our climate, the devastation that's happening. It can be that, but it's also the impulse to protect nature and animals. And so all of that trauma material in all the different areas is more at the surface. It's more wanting to reveal itself, but if you're not able to bring spaciousness and kindness to yourself as you're opening to whatever that is on an individual or collective level, then it can be acted out. It can be projected. It can be split off, as we were exploring earlier. But as you bring the healing awareness to those areas, you can start to be freed up of this suppressed energy, and it becomes this positive life force energy that it's like a some kind of consciousness composting process where you're composting all that old unresolved material, and now new life is being born out of it, and new structures that are more sound and coming more from the depths of mature awareness, which is again, the Pluto-Saturn can have this kind of gravitas of deep, powerful maturity, maturity that's informed from the depths of nature and the depths of the psyche. And when that happens, obviously, you're no longer clinging to the past, and you're in the attitude of success. Now, this brings me back to John Boehner, former Speaker of the House. This is the card that came with Boehner. Wasn't he another orange one? Yeah, so I was saying John Boehner, of all people, is coming out. He's had a total come to Jesus moment, and now he sees that cannabis should be descheduled and made federally legal. And wow, he's come full circle on marijuana. John Boehner. I'm having all kinds of tech problems. It's unbelievable. I've had a headset go. I've had the video camera went. I've had both headsets go. Really, I'm back to the first one. Just hoping it survives. Mercury, Saturn in the sky on my natal Mercury-Uranus conjunction. Right on it. It's got a lot of positive gifts, I would say. I've been trying to channel the sound engineer, which is one version of Saturn, Mercury, Uranus, with Saturn bringing a kind of mastery and maturity and focus with the Mercury, Uranus communications technology. But Saturn can also block things, as it has been. It's been some of both. So, okay, where was I? John Boehner? Yeah, wow. What could I say about John Boehner? I mean, he's come around on cannabis, and apparently he now sees how much good it is doing in the world, and he feels that it should be descheduled on a federal level, which would be huge if that and when that it's going to happen. But when it happens, that's the big moment. Maybe it'll happen under this Jupiter-Uranus opposition, the last phase of it. which I said earlier is June, July, August. We should look for some breakthroughs this summer, like happy developments of stuff that already got started last year, significant. It's like the gift of an alignment will sometimes come at the end and grant its last blessings. And so I think this last moment of the Jupiter-Uranus this summer could reveal more in different areas, like, different kinds of scientific breakthroughs. And I mentioned the breakthrough, the societal breakthrough with the acknowledgement, the confirmation of interest in UFOs, big breakthrough. But this other breakthrough I'm talking about with John Boehner is on a societal level. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, alcohol prohibition ended under a Jupiter-Uranus alignment. I'll check that out and put it on the video, but I'm pretty sure prohibition ended, and we're seeing the end of marijuana prohibition. I mean, regardless of Jeff Sessions, whatever his voice is, it's going to be drowned out in the very loud voices of the people like John Boehner that are now working for the corporations that will benefit from marijuana being legalized, which, of course, billions and billions of dollars are now being made, and so it's just inevitable. But this is evidence of the Jupiter-Uranus alignment and our very lovely Jupiter trine Neptune. We've been in this since the end of last year. It hasn't been as strong recently, but now it's coming back in, and it's going to be strong right up through, I'm looking at my notes here, September, mid-September. So from now through mid-September, we're getting this Jupiter trine Neptune wave. Jupiter-Neptune. Jupiter, of course, is positive, hopeful, joyful, rich, abundant, fertile, generous. And Neptune is consciousness. It has to do with dreams and visions and spiritual experiences, amongst other things. The trine, of course, is a flowing, supportive relationship, and you want to think about it as a big, long, flowing, easy to ride pleasure wave. That's what Jupiter trine Neptune is. The potential to ride a pretty easy wave that is hopeful and has a kind of a positive, hopeful orientation. And hopefully that's part of what I'm channeling here is some hopeful consciousness, the hope channel of the psyche. We all have a hope channel, and we know how to find it. We know the things that help us remember to be hopeful, because a hopeful attitude is a much better one than a fearful attitude. It's okay to have fear, but you want to work with the fear to ultimately come to a more hopeful attitude. That's all of our responsibility, as much as it's our responsibility to look at the shadow aspect, to give 10% of our lives to that responsibility. We also have at least 10% responsibility to make contact with hope, because hope is real. Hope is a dimension of consciousness. It's something you can tune into and be a channel of and have flow through you. And so we've got a hope wave happening right now. It's good surfing for hope, but believe it or not, there's some other gnarly waves, and you got to look out for those. With the Mars, Saturn, Pluto, of course, I don't want to be Pollyanna. That's the dominant energy. It's deadly serious, and there's serious shit going on. Which reminds me, one of the deep things that I want to be sure to mention about Saturn, Pluto that feels like a missing piece if I don't name it. And this is the development of the Me Too movement since last, I believe it was October. And the Harvey Weinstein scandal. And there's a lot that could be said here, and I don't want to just give it quick brush by here. I think I want to devote a more careful exploration to it in another video. But Saturn, Pluto, it absolutely has to do with sexual shadow and all of the different kinds of sexual pain and sexual trauma that humans can experience. And so when it's, in alignment, it's more likely to be a focus. There's more likely to be a light shining on it. And in particular, though, I want to just name and anchor one of the positive potentials of the Me Too movement is what I think is a natural process that happens in history of sexual maturation. What is sexual maturation? What does it look like? There's a natural, organic sexual maturation process that humans can go through and that collectives can go through in stages and at different times that are more intensified. And we're in one of those times where there's a potential supported by a dimension of consciousness itself for sexual maturation to happen. And it's one of the best ways of working with a Saturn-Pluto moment like ours currently through 2020. Or if you have a personal transit or you're born with it, that could be a lifelong focus. But to think about honoring, what is my sexual maturation process? What's interfering with it? What's blocking it? What's frustrating it? And what could I do to participate in it, to make space for it so it can happen? And there's lots of different things that you can do. Just, like I was mentioning, shadow work in general with 12-step work, and there's all kinds of specific approaches with therapies. And I did something called the Hoffman process, which was incredible for shadow work. And I've done work with breath work and sacred medicines that has been incredibly helpful. And there's other organizations that work specifically to heal all trauma, but sexual trauma, giving specific attention there if that's any part of your history. But then, getting support to take your sexual maturation to the next level. And there are sex therapists and organizations that are devoted to sex positivity and sex healing and sexual maturity. And the one that I'm aware of here in California is the Human Awareness Institute. And I recommend everybody check it out. It's a very mature organization that's about helping people to mature on a sexual level, but also just in terms of intimacy in general. And so, circling back now to John Boehner, we got to wrap things up here. And I got to draw a couple more cards. And I got to sip some water. Okay. Alrighty. John Boehner. It gives me hope. Who would have thought? Wow. Incredible. But this is the Jupiter trine Neptune. I live in California. I'm someone who's been fortunate to have access to medical marijuana. I've got a legit health issue that is legitimately addressed by marijuana, and it's been an incredible ally for me, especially in the last years. And like the UFO issue, it's something you kind of have to keep hidden, not totally these days, totally changing, but it's, it's less socially acceptable because it hasn't been legal. That's been the setting that we've all been living in. And even where there's medical marijuana, it hasn't been certainly not federally legal, but not for the recreational general populace. And that's, when that's the case, you can't necessarily reveal that something has been healing medicine for you without other people misunderstanding or coming from their cultural programming or, the stigma or whatever. And so for me, in just the last few months, UFOs, and here in California, it's full out legal since January. Wow, I didn't expect it would be so impactful for me, but it has been. It's like, wow, I can walk around and my collective of human beings has voted that they feel that this is suitable for the general population above 21 for responsible adult consumption, like lots of other things. So we've come to that collective decision, and it's happened rapidly. And for me, it makes me actually feel safer in the world. The war on drugs is ending. At the same time, there's still obvious challenges with Trump suggesting the death penalty for drug dealers. But so it's a mixture, some hope and some heavy shit. So it's like, how do you stay in touch with both? That's our dance. That's the alchemy. That's the yin and the yang. Right? That's what we're talking about. How do you hold the hope at the same time you're aware of the shadow? How do you remember to keep your heart open and in touch with love and light at the same time you're looking at the darkness and aware of it? Because holding them at the same time is what heals the potential for what are called possession states, where you get stuck on one channel in your psyche. You get stuck in negativity, you get stuck in fear. But then you remember hope, you tune into it, the hopeful stories, like John Boehner and Senator Harry Reid and John Glenn. We got some interesting politicians happening that are coming to some interesting conclusions. It's not all bad out there. There's a lot of shit, but we got to hold on to some hope. And so let's see what animal spirit wants to come right now. Is it this one? Oh, it's a deer. It's a deer. I love this artist, Kim Kranz. That deer has heart. That's what I think. All deers are deer. This one especially. Look how sweet. This is the open, sensitive, alert. That's a deer, right? Super alert. But also able to relax, to enjoy. And this, I don't know, this face of love, it seems to me. So, of course, you got to think about, how do you relate to deer? What do they mean for you? What does it mean when they show up? I had a deer out on my altar over here. Stag. Because I got this stag. I actually got 2 stags for myself, but I'll share them with everybody. 2 stags, 3 stags. Well, 4 if you count the statue. 4 stags and 1 little deer. Oh. That's a lot of stags. And 1 little deer. Yep, the Me Too movement. This deer probably needs some help, just like a lot of people. Maybe let's move those stags over there. Oh, those are moose. So a couple mooses. And this seems to be a stag and a deer. A lot of power, a lot of capacity. What does it say here? Success and triumph. Success there, success here. 5 of Wands. This deck is called the Heart of Fairy Oracle. For me, the stags, they always remind me of, I don't know if you ever saw Fantasia 2000. Amazing sequence at the end. What's the piece of music? It's the Firebird Suite. The Firebird Suite, the Phoenix. In that Disney animation version of the Firebird Suite, this incredible sequence of a stag that is carrying this young, fragile, feminine being. The protective stag, that's Saturn, Pluto, the protective forces of nature, protecting the deer, protecting, maybe this is a young deer, protecting the children, but also able to fight and express power. So, Heart of Fairy Oracle. Heart of Fairy Oracle. The paradox. Interesting. The paradox. I think this has been a paradoxical conversation where we're talking about how to hold paradox, how to have a complex relationship with now as opposed to a simplistic, superficial relationship, but a deep and mature relationship with now indicates the capacity to hold paradox, to hold, competing truths at the same time. I think that's what astrology helps with. I'm going to draw one more card, and we're going to call it a What the F episode. So if you like this, please hit the subscribe button. Leave a comment below, hit the thumbs up, share if you like. I hope this has been helpful. It's been helpful for me. I feel good about what's come here. The success card came, and the encouragement to let go of the past. I think we're in a giant transformational process, obviously. It's interesting as I think about these two cards, the clinging to the past and the success cards are meant to be the answer, or the kind of conclusion of the conversation. This question about praying for guidance, being open and innocent and available to guidance, and the capacity to have trust in the guidance and the trust in the process, and the willingness to confront those trauma areas, the repressed territory, bring light to them. The likelihood of success. I don't know, it seems to be mirroring to all of us that are watching this, that there's likelihood of success if we can trust the process and let go of the past. Because we're in a giant, I don't know, it's an 8-10 year process. Let's be real about it. 2028, 2026. 2020, the election looks pretty intense. There's a lot going on there. Saturn, Pluto, Saturn, Uranus, Jupiter, Pluto. We'll talk about it. So I don't know. I don't know what's possible. I don't know about impeachment. I don't know. This guy is clearly, got a mobster mentality, and so who knows? But no matter what, we're in a long process, and we just got to be willing to stay hopeful, stay engaged, stay with it, and trust it, and remember to stay balanced. And if we do, there's going to be a total transformation of all the structures of our psychology and all the structures of society and all the structures of what do we think about reality. I think all that stuff's going down. It's good. And we're going up, ascension, right? Okay. Last card. Here it is. This is Mahadeva Padma's second deck called the Tao Oracle. And it says duration. Oh, look. Duration. Oops. Let's see. I'm going to read it up here. I'll read it to you. At the bottom it says constancy, continuity, endurance, perseverance, maturity, strengthening, stability, a deep commitment. Wow. This card could not be more Saturn-Pluto, an obvious resonance with a lot of what we've been talking about. This mountain, indicates like depths, deep energy that's lasted for long periods of time. So we're in a process that takes a long time, but holding on to the endurance and remembering our strength and the deep commitment. I like that's the last word here. Deep commitment. Pluto's deep, Saturn is commitment. It's a time of deep commitment. It's a time of deep commitment to a truth and reconciliation process, an internal truth and reconciliation process. And I think ultimately, collectively, we're going to go through a truth and reconciliation process where we face the truth, we get real, and we transform into something better. That's my prayer, and that's my expectation and my hope. Blessings to everybody. Till our next recording of WTF, check me out. My website is MatthewStelzner.com, www.MatthewStelzner.com, or it also is stelz.biz, stelz.biz. So blessings, everybody. Take care.